Kieran, and good evening, everyone. Kieran has stolen my introduction, so now I'm just going to have to make something up on the spot. Thanks for that, Kieran. I talk about sex for a living. How does that sound? It's a true story. I took what many of us as young men thought was only a dream and turned it into a job. Interestingly, I talk about sex all the time, and my housemate, who's not a Christian, he is constantly surprised by the books that I bring home on pornography and sex addiction and all kinds of different crazy things like that. And as I was going out of my house tonight, he said to me, "What are you doing tonight?" And I said, "I'm going to give a talk to a bunch of youth workers and children's workers and people who go to church about pornography." And he looked back at me and he said, "For a guy that doesn't watch porn, you do talk about it a lot." But I do want to talk about pornography tonight, but I don't want to start there. I want you to picture with me the scene. I want to take you to first century Jerusalem and the story of a rabbi in his early 30s. As he enters the temple, the crowd are tense and all of their eyes are fixed upon him. Because this rabbi, wherever he goes, causes a stir. It's a hot day, people are sweating in their flip-flops or sandals, whatever they were wearing at the time, in their dresses. And they're wondering what the blazes is going to say, because on this day, which is a Sabbath day, the day after a feast day, where he has been in that same temple and he has said that he is the water of life. He's created such tension, and these people are aware of this tension. They feel this tension because they realize that he is claiming to be equal with God, that it harks back to this thing in Isaiah 55, where God says that everyone who thirsts come to the living waters and drink. And Jesus has said, "I am the water of life." And after this feast day, it's always a Sabbath. And Jesus is coming into the temple on this baking hot day. And there's tension because people are angry about the things that he's saying. The Pharisees, they're scheming against him. They're trying to find a way to discredit him. They know that if they kill him outright, or if they capture him and take him off, that they will create a hero out of him. That he will be suddenly this leader. He'll suddenly have a cause. And so they want to discredit him so that people are no longer interested in his message. And so they come up with this scheme. And you'll know the story well from John chapter 8. You're probably tracking right with me as we see this story unfolding. And Jesus goes into the temple and he sits down, which is one of the things that the rabbis did when they wanted a signal that they were about to teach. And Jesus sits down. He draws a crowd immediately because of the controversy that surrounds him. And he begins to teach. And into this scene bursts a group of Pharisees. And with them, they have a woman who is wearing little more than a bedsheet. And everyone, it's like a game of tennis at Wimbledon. Everyone's eyes are flitting back and forth between Jesus and the Pharisees. What on earth is going to happen? What's Jesus going to do? What are they going to do? How is this going to play out? And there's a woman probably in tears, probably scared, probably frightened, surrounded by a crowd of angry men, some confused men. And the crowd are looking on. They don't know what's happening. They're aware of Roman guards around the higher echelons of the temple, standing, looking on to make sure that they're behaving themselves. And then the Pharisees play their first card. This woman was caught in adultery, and the law of Moses commands that she be stoned. This woman's been caught in adultery. Why the blazes am I talking about adultery? Why am I bringing up this story? We're supposed to be talking about pornography. Well, one of the things that I think there's a great similarity between when we talk about pornography and this story about adultery, because wasn't it Jesus who said, if anyone looks at a woman or indeed another human being with lust in their heart, they're committing adultery? What we talk about for us as Christians when we think about pornography, we're talking about sexual sin, we're talking about adultery, we're talking about lust, and pornography is big on lust. And so I think there's a massive crossover between these two things. Here's how the Catholic Church categorizes pornography. They say this: pornography consists in removing real or simulated sexual acts from the intimacy of the partners in order to display them deliberately to third parties. It's quite a complex definition. Here's what Katie, 15-year-old student at Sarah, who's with me, Sarah works for Romance Academy too, we were working in a school last week, said to young people, come up with your definitions or your twefinitions, because we said they needed to be short enough to be tweeted, 140 characters to define porn. And this is Katie's attempt. Pornography is sexy times with your computer screen. Quite like that. We know what we're talking about when we're talking about pornography, and there's so many layers to this stuff that we don't have time to get into tonight, but I think we've got a good idea of what we talk about when we're talking about pornography. Is it a problem for our young people? Well, 1 in 3 10-year-olds have seen pornography online. Does that surprise you? They reckon that the average age now is somewhere around 8 or 9 years old that young people are first exposed to pornography. The young people that I work with aren't that young. They've probably already been exposed to pornography for a long time, and perhaps that surprises you, perhaps it doesn't. What about this statistic? 83% of boys and 57% of girls have seen group sex on the internet. Shocking statistics about just how prevalent porn is in our culture and in our society, and we don't have time to talk about all the ways that creeps into marketing and advertising and mainstream television before and after the watershed, let alone the stuff that young people can easily access online. One of the boys we were working with last week, he said that pornography links had come up whilst he was surfing eBay looking for computer games. And there was links on the side telling him that there was women waiting to meet him in his area, and he knew that there wasn't really women waiting to meet him in his area, but that was actually linked to pornography sites. 14, 15-year-old boy, just on eBay. Stuff is being pushed in our young people's faces. So it's no surprise that the largest single group of internet consumers is 12 to 17-year-olds. We might think that this is a problem for adults. When we think of pornography, perhaps we think of sort of the stereotypical dirty old man looking at a magazine. Some of us, that's the image that we have of pornography. But actually nowadays, the biggest group of consumers is young people on mobile phones and on tablets consuming pornography. And as a youth worker, and as someone who loves Jesus and wants the best for young people and their sexuality, that deeply concerns me. And I know that it deeply concerns you too. Why do we have a problem with pornography? Sarah and I have been doing loads and loads of work to articulate this really well. Why do we as Christians have a problem with pornography? Because if I was to ask for a show of hands in this room, who's got a problem with young people watching pornography? Probably every hand in this room would go up. But actually, when we say to people why, articulate the problem that we have with pornography, we find that people find that a little bit more difficult to do, to really unpick why we don't like it. Here's a quote from Lyndon Bowring, which I really like. He said, porn sends the message to men and women that sexual faithfulness to one person is neither necessary nor satisfying. As a group of people that believe passionately in long-term, sustainable, committed and faithful relationships, of course, that's something that we have a problem with. Here's some of the other lies that pornography sells people, that the illusion of sexual accomplishment and expertise. People who watch pornography and feel like they could easily do what they see on the screen creates this illusion that we're able to do things that we can probably do in real life. A temporary release from stress and anxiety, depression, feelings of loneliness and unattractiveness. People are using pornography, our young people, and actually older people as well, adults, perhaps some of us in this room, using it to ease the pain of some of those things in our own lives. And then thirdly, intense but transient and fragmented thrill of personal pleasure. We were talking to young people about this last week, and actually, we have to be honest, pornography sometimes feels good to look at. Otherwise, people wouldn't do it, would they? But actually, it's that transient nature of the pleasure. It's not lasting. And it actually creates these feelings of loss and a desire for something more than what porn can ever fulfill. It promises much, but it delivers very little. And our young people are struggling and dealing with this stuff on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. There's this tension for us when we think about this stuff. And there's tension too in our story back in John 8. These Pharisees, and there's a massive theological tension going on here in John 8 too, because these Pharisees have come up with what they think is the perfect trap for Jesus. You'll probably be familiar with it, that Jesus, when they say to him, this woman was caught in adultery, and Moses commands us to stone her, and then they hit him with the kicker. What do you say? And so the crowd, as they look on, they see Jesus, and he's caught between the Pharisees who are standing right in front of him with this half-naked woman who's been caught in the very act of adultery, and the Roman guards who they can see on top of the wall, who are looking down, because the Roman law does not allow the Jews to execute anyone. And they know that if Jesus says, yeah, stone her, and the stoning starts, that those guards will be straight down to arrest him. So Jesus either has to say, forget about the law of Moses, that's over and done with, and then he discredits himself, he's not a proper Jew, he can't be trusted, or he says, yeah, let's stone her, and he causes a riot in the temple and he gets himself arrested. It's seemingly the perfect plan. And Jesus, for some reason unknown to me and unknown to Bible scholars for 2,000 years, he bends down on the ground and he begins to write. And no one knows what he's writing because the Bible doesn't record it. But I want to make a suggestion to you that I think what Jesus is writing in the ground is death, or stone her, or kill her. And I'll tell you why. Because when he stands back up again, he says, all right, stone her. But the person who's got no sin, you throw the first stone. And the crowd who are watching, the genius of this does not dawn on them straight away because their sweaty paws are holding these rocks ready to pile on top of this woman. And actually, isn't that what happens so often in this subject of porn? We're ready to heap on top of people a whole bunch of guilt and shame. And that's what these Pharisees and that's what this crowd want to do with this woman. They want to heap on top of her all the guilt and shame that is signified in these rocks that they're holding in their hands. And the crowd know that they take the lead from the elders. And so all of the guys holding stones, they look to the oldest guys to see what they're going to do in response to Jesus' challenge. And you can feel the tension. Jesus is trapped here. He's caught between two things. He can't choose the right thing. But actually he said, all right, stone her. Let's go with the law of Moses. And one by one, these elders drop their stones and slip away from the temple. And then the next eldest one who's left, everyone's looking at him, and then suddenly he doesn't want his stone anymore, and he disappears. And one by one, the Bible tells us that these men leave the temple. And then the Bible says that Jesus bends back down, and he starts writing on the ground. When I started thinking about this, story and what it might say to us about pornography and how we engage with our young people on pornography, one of the things that I noticed is twice Jesus gets down to the level of the woman who is caught in adultery. And it reminded me that one of the things that porn takes away from us is intimacy. It promises sexual fulfillment, but it doesn't deliver intimacy. And we see in Genesis 3, verse 9, God, at the beginning of the world and the beginning of creation, God searching for Adam and Eve in the garden, saying, "Where are you?" So right at the beginning, when sin separated us from God, God was searching for us to bring us back into intimacy. And I think through the cross, he wants to restore that relationship, both the intimacy that we can experience with God, but also the intimacy that we can experience with each other. And here is Jesus, I think, symbolically saying he's searching for intimacy with broken people who are sinners and who are empty. And I wonder if our challenge as youth workers is this: to make intimacy the unmissable thing, that young people strive to experience intimacy, that they don't strive for sexual prowess or the lies that porn sells them, but actually they strive for intimacy with God and with each other. I want to give you 3 questions. I'm really short of time, so I'm going to rush through these last couple of slides, but I'm happy to send you them if you want them. 3 questions to ask, get young people to ask of porn. How does it portray men and women? Is that how God created them? Is that what he wants for them? How does it show sexual relationships? Is it in the context of a relationship or is it in isolation? What's the purpose of the material? Is it educational? Is it therapeutic? Bunch of top tips. I'm happy to send these to you. But I want to finish with this idea. Because, do you know what? As a youth worker, it's really easy for me I talk about this stuff all the time. I'm working out this stuff. Why is porn a problem? Why is it that I don't want young people to watch pornography? And actually, what I'm aware of is that all of my clever arguments and all of that stuff, at the end of the day, what young people get from church and from their families all too often is guilt and shame. And here I see Jesus in the most difficult of situations for himself, taking the pressure off this woman and putting it on himself. And I think he did that at the cross. And so the question for us as youth workers is, are you standing with stones in your hand? Or are you kneeling where our young people are in the dirt? Inviting them into intimacy with God himself and with each other, with those around them. Because that's our challenge when it comes to pornography. Are we prepared to get down where young people are? I've done this, but I haven't done it perfectly. I'll tell you about one young person I met who I mentor. He's 12 years old, and he was telling me about his experiences at school and college, not college. And it became apparent to me that he was being exposed to pornography. And so in the most awkward, it was the worst piece of youth work I've probably ever done. But I brought up the subject of pornography, and he told me that his friends were watching it, and he was wondering whether he should, or he didn't know how to handle it. And I said, has anyone ever talked to you about this before? And he said, no. So even though it was awkward, and even though I didn't do a great job, I gave him someone to talk to. And many of our young people need to have those kind of conversations with you. Here's something that can help. We're selling these at the end. I'm done. Let me pray for you. And then Matt is going to kick me off. God, this is such a massive, massive topic, and we've merely scratched the surface, but I pray that tonight each one of us can feel your heart for our young people and all that they're facing. That your heart is to kneel down where they're at and to engage with them in the stuff that they're facing. That they can experience love and grace and fulfillment that you offer them. God, I pray for intimate relationships that model genuine intimacy for our young people and for us as youth workers. In the name of Jesus, amen.